Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Thursday. It's April 17th. Today is day 559. Today is Maundy Thursday. And a verse for today that comes from the scriptures, a new command that I give you is to love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. I think that's a great word for us today. I'm currently now in Beit Sahor in the occupied Palestinian territories. I spent the day today in Jerusalem and the last several days in Jerusalem. I've spent time along the Gaza border in Israel. And, as I've met with so many people of different religious backgrounds, I met with numerous rabbis, as I've met with Palestinians, the experience, the life experience, and the stories of the people here are so vastly different. And, the people here, regardless of if they are the occupied or the occupier, regardless of if they are victims of trauma or living under decades of occupation, all of the people here are traumatized in some way, shape, or form, whether or not they're soldiers in Gaza or those who are suffering the effects of soldiers' incursions and bombs. And I say that just that there's so much pain. And honestly, I think God's the only one who can bring peace. That there could be a political agreement, but there would still be hatred. Or there could be a negotiated settlement and it wouldn't resolve the decades of the lack of trust, the fear and insecurity that individuals feel, many Jewish Israelis, and the pain and suffering of being a people without self-determination, living under military control. And there are power differentials and the privileges of life on the other side of the Green Line or the 67 borders. There are such incredible privileges. And yet the fortitude and love and hospitality I see in the Palestinian people is also inspiring. So I just wanted to share that as a few thoughts. Today is Maundy Thursday. As Holy Week continues, tomorrow is Black Friday or Good Friday. Today is the day of Holy Week that commemorates Christ's washing of the disciples' feet. And with that in mind, I thought it was appropriate to start the weekly update, which will be a little longer today. I know my updates have been so long lately. I'm sorry. But I wanted to start with a reading of the significance of today from the scriptures. So the scripture for today is John 13, 12 through 17, and 34 and 35. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on their clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. May we hear the news reports from today and the past week with humility, listening to these updates from on the ground and using them as fodder for prayer and a guide to us in our efforts of seeking to pursue justice and peace. In the occupied Palestinian territories, earlier this week, a 19-year-old was shot in the IDF by the West Bank, and he died of his wounds. His name was Malik Ali Akatab. He died of wounds sustained on Monday when Israeli troops shot him during a raid at the Al Jalazon refugee camp in the West Bank. On Wednesday, yesterday, the IDF said it killed 2 Palestinians in exchange of fire with the IDF near Ramallah. One took part in a shooting attack in January. The 2 killed were a 23-year-old Mohammed Sakraneh and Marwe Yasser Khazemia. Marwe was 19 years old. Mohammed was 23. Unprecedented levels of violence, severe movement restrictions, and the cancellation of 180,000 permits to work in Israel and its settlements have triggered a severe humanitarian crisis in the West Bank. It's important for us to not forget that ethnic cleansing is happening not only in Gaza, but also in East Jerusalem and the West Bank as well. Israeli settlers attacked and beat up a Palestinian man in the Kassan village near Bethlehem, and they stole his livestock this week. And Israel's Ben Gvir stormed the occupied West Bank's Ibrahimi Mosque. He's a far-right minister. He led a group of settlers into a controversial visit in the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron. He also addressed internal Israeli political issues, including efforts to remove the Shin Bet chief, Ronan Bar, and tensions with the prime minister. Ben-Gvir made multiple controversial visits under armed guards to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound during the war on Gaza as well. This latest visit comes as hundreds of Israeli settlers entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the past 3 days to mark Passover or Pesach. CMEP put out a statement last Friday on April 11th about the killing of the 14-year-old American Palestinian Amir Rabeh in the West Bank. He was killed by Israeli forces on April 6th, and we are calling for an investigation into his death. We said that the loss of this young life is an unspeakable tragedy and a devastating reminder of the human cost of ongoing violence and occupation. Such actions must never be accepted or normalized. The killing of children must stir moral outrage, not silence. What is needed now is courageous diplomacy rooted in justice, accountability, and the protection of all people in the region. In Jerusalem, this week has been Passover, Pesach. Jews around the world have commemorated the holiday. In Jerusalem, Israeli settlers under escort of the Israeli police had celebrations at Lion's Gate in the Old City with loud music blaring from their cars. A Palestinian youth was assaulted and arrested on Tuesday in Atur on the Mount of Olives neighborhood. Israeli settlers carried out multiple incursions for Jewish rituals in front of the Cotton's Gate after Israeli forcible closure of shops in the area. Israeli settlers officially took control over the Petra Hotel in Omar bin Al-Khattab Square in Jaffa Gate. This week, Israel ordered the closure of 6 United Nations schools in East Jerusalem after raids. The schools have 30 days to close. Approximately 800 students will be directly impacted by the closure orders and might not be able to finish their school year. Moving on to Gaza, Israel's security minister, Katz, issued a statement saying Israel will not let in humanitarian aid in Gaza without a ceasefire agreement and a prisoner exchange. And last Sunday, Palm Sunday, the Al-Ali Anglican Hospital in Gaza was hit by 2 Israeli missiles. CMEP condemned the attacks. We put out a call for the respect of human life and accountability. We put out a statement. I would encourage you to read it, talking about how this is one of our most sacred times of year. We condemned in the strongest possible terms the bombing of the hospital. Al-Ali is an Anglican institution and one of the oldest continually operating hospitals in Gaza. It's the only Christian hospital in Gaza. It has a cancer treatment, the only one in the enclave. And the bombing is a violation of the sacredness of life, and it's especially abhorrent during this sacred time for Christians. The deliberate targeting of a medical facility is a clear violation of international law, a war crime, and a crime against humanity. This attack has significantly damaged the facility. Israel will soon vigorously expand its offensive throughout most of Gaza, Defense Minister Katz said last weekend, adding that the IDF completed the takeover of a security zone, cutting off Rafah from Han Yunis. That's the Marag corridor in the south. And at least 25 people were killed and 89 wounded between Tuesday night and Wednesday, according to reports. Since the end of the ceasefire on March 18th, 1,652 people were killed, 4,391 wounded by IDF strikes in Gaza. So that's just since March 18th. Last Saturday, the death tolls were similar, with 21 people killed and 64 people wounded. And since the outbreak of the war on October 7th, 50,933 people have been killed in Gaza. Those numbers are believed to be vastly underestimated. Those are only direct deaths. More than 116 people have been injured. So the IDF, I mentioned, completed the work on the route dividing South Gaza. The Israeli army also has encircled Rafah, the southernmost city, severing it from the rest of the strip and calling it a security zone. Israel also has attacked water systems on Gaza. It is blocking repairs. They've led to absolutely catastrophic conditions for Palestinians, according to UN humanitarian officials. 420,000 Gazans have been displaced since the renewal of fighting in Gaza, according to the UN. The agency underlined the figure is in addition to the hundreds of thousands repeatedly displaced prior to the ceasefire. OSHA said no tents are available for distribution and addressed a rise in acute malnutrition in the territory. The number of children who received supplementary feeding decreased by more than 2/3 in March alone. The Ministry of Information in Gaza on Wednesday said that Israel attacked and rendered 37 aid centers, 28 community kitchens unstable, and more than 1.1 million children are suffering from severe malnutrition. That is roughly half the population of Gaza. Thousands of Palestinians demonstrated against the war and the Hamas rule in Beit Lahia in North Gaza several weeks after the previous unprecedented protests. Mohammed 41 said, "This is not just a protest. This is a cry for help from thousands. We're tired of Hamas speaking on our behalf while we bury our children. We want peace. We want life." Protesters said Hamas-affiliated security forces were seen nearby in civilian clothes, but did not intervene. "They can't arrest everyone," said Samid, a young man who joined the demonstration with friends. "This is different from before. There are too many people now. People are no longer afraid. We've already lost everything." Another demonstrator, Mustafa, described the protests as a warning signal to Hamas that they can no longer be ignored. Defense Minister Katz said the IDF will remain in Gaza buffer zones in any arrangements, temporary or permanent, and clarified that no humanitarian aid will enter. And the Ministry of Health in Gaza reported that hospitals are expected to cease their operations within about 2 weeks. Bakeries are shut down because of flour and fuel shortages. Water and desalination stations are not functioning. Due to this reality, there's a real concern that at any moment there could be a phenomenon of mass death from hunger, disease, and the consequences of a lack of medical treatment may develop. 3 Israeli civilians crossed into Gaza. They were returned back to Israel by soldiers. And conditions of the hospitals in Gaza are beyond description, said the World Health Organization, adding that they were seeing attack after attack on hospitals and healthcare workers amid medical supplies reaching critically low levels. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu visited North Gaza on Tuesday. And moving on to negotiations, Islamic Jihad published a video of Israeli hostage Ram Breslavsky, the first visual documentation of him since he was captured. He's shown begging Netanyahu, "Get me out of here." As of Thursday morning, Israel's not received an official reply from Hamas regarding its proposal for a hostage deal. Sources close to Israel's prime minister's office confirmed, while the BBC reported on Tuesday that Hamas has rejected the proposal, citing a Palestinian source. On Tuesday, 6 p.m. Jerusalem time, the Israeli military spokesperson Abu Abeidah communicated, "We announced that we have lost contact with the group capturing the soldier Adan Alexander. Following a direct bombardment targeting their location, we are still trying to reach them. I have not heard any updates about Adan Alexander's situation since then." It was also announced on Tuesday that the last round of Cairo-mediated talks to restore the ceasefire and free Israeli hostages ended with no apparent breakthrough. Hamas later said it was studying a proposal received from mediators and that it would send a delegation to Qatar to continue indirect talks. Also earlier this week, Hamas released a video that was warning to be prepared on Gaza captives. The group was holding the U.S.-Israeli captive soldier. After warning over the loss of contact, the armed wing of Hamas released this video directed at captives' families. "Be prepared. Soon your children will be returned back in black coffins with their bodies torn apart by shrapnel from your army's missiles." This is the Qassam brigades. They said this in the video. It was accompanied by footage from a previous handover of captives, Israeli captives' remains in coffins, to the International Committee of the Red Cross. "Your leadership has signed the decision to execute the prisoners in the Gaza Strip." Hamas also called for a global week of demonstrations to end the Gaza war, and captivity survivor Noah Argamani has been named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people for 2025. Jewish lawyer Emhoff, husband of Kamala Harris, who selected Argamani for the honor, described the kidnapping footage showing her being forcibly taken on a motorcycle. He said that after 240 days in Hamas captivity, she's shown extraordinary courage and humanity in speaking out for the remaining hostages, including her partner, Avnatan Or. Emhoff said the courage displayed by Argamani embodied Jewish resilience and strength, even in the worst of moments, and that it is living proof to the world that despite everything, we will dance again. Israeli troops will remain in security zones. I've talked about that already. Minister Netanyahu met on Wednesday with Vicky and Romy Cohen, the mother and sister of the captive Nimrod Cohen, as a part of several recent meetings with relatives of hostages. In the conversation, Vicky Cohen said Netanyahu told them there's no American pressure on Israel to end the war. According to her, Netanyahu said Israel's exerting military pressure on Hamas and stated the IDF knows the location of the hostages and is not taking risks. Former Israeli police officers, 200 of them, including 8 ex-police chiefs, signed letters supporting the end of the war to return hostages. 14 aid workers who were killed by the IDF last month died, mainly of gunshots to the head or chest, while others suffered shrapnel-inflicted wounds, according to a report from the New York Times. 70% of Israelis support a deal to return the hostages and to end the war. The Israel Army Chief Zamir warned Netanyahu of the depleted manpower and how it threatens his ability to be able to carry out political objectives in Gaza. According to the Israeli news, Zamir acknowledged the military solutions without subsequent and parallel political tracks are not enough. There's been significant backlash within Israeli society, with over 3,500 academics, 3,000 education workers, 1,000 parents, 1,500 Armor Corps soldiers signing petitions demanding an end to the war that serves personal and political interests, while endangering both soldiers and captives. Organizers of a medical corps petition calling for an end to war said that the Israeli army's begun to take disciplinary steps against reservists from the corps who signed the letter, including warnings and dismissals. And Kibbutz Nir Oz announced that Billy the dog, who was taken from her home on October 7th, was found by Golani troops in Rafah and returned to her owners. Prime Minister Netanyahu met this week with the U.S. bipartisan congressional representatives, Senator Ernst from the Republican Party and Representative Wasserman Schultz from the Democratic Party met with Prime Minister at the Prime Minister's office. Netanyahu's office said the three discussed ongoing efforts to free the hostages and the war in Gaza. Tuesday, I spent some time at Kibbutz Kfar Aza, where I've been before, and met a man who lived through the military attacks. The militants' attacks on October 7th, and it's important for us to hold into tension the truths of the horror of that day and the past 559 days, which have been intolerable for those living in Gaza. And the situation in the West Bank gets worse and worse. At the Nova Music Festival on that day, 384 people were killed there. 169 people were killed in the area. 232 died trying to escape. 44 participants in Nova were kidnapped and taken hostage to Gaza. 59 hostages remain, and it's believed somewhere between 21 and 24 of them are still alive. I talked this week in one of my updates about the sounds of war, the loud bombs, the blasts over the course of 90 minutes, the intermittent artillery fire that could be heard in the distance, and what it was like just in my visit, just in this last week on the Gaza enclave, to hear all those sounds, knowing that they were literally weapons of death, killing people just a few miles away in the Gaza Strip. And at least 300 Hamas and other militants died at Kfar Aza that day. Most of the community members have not returned. Less than 24 are there, but volunteers, soldiers, and others stay at the kibbutz. And the man hosting us told us harrowing stories of sneaking out of the bomb shelter to check on his neighbor's wife, who's his wife's best friend, only to find that she'd been killed. And he said his perspective is that Hamas came to kill him, but we returned and are rebuilding our lives. We just want to live in peace with our neighbors. We want for Palestinians what we want for ourselves, security and peace. That will not come from war. Instead, we're just growing a next generation of enemies. The longer this war continues, it must be brought to an end. If only the world could hear the millions of Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories who want the exact same thing. They want peace and just an opportunity to raise their children with hope for a future. Jordan yesterday said that they arrested 16 citizens with ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, conspiring to manufacture and launch rockets with the kingdom. In a statement, the Muslim Brotherhood's Jordanian branch disavowed any connection to the alleged plots. We know from the Palestinian Authority that the PA actually gave intelligence and assisted in the operations. In Syria, the U.S. military is set to consolidate its presence, and the move could cut troops in the country by half in the coming months. And Saudi Arabia has agreed to pay off a $15 million debt in arrears that has to be paid to the World Bank before Syria can receive new grants and other forms of assistance. In Yemen, suspected U.S. airstrikes in the Yemen capital killed at least 7 people and wounded 29 one night this week. And pro-government militias in Yemen are planning a ground offensive targeting Houthis to try to take advantage of the U.S. bombing campaign, degrading the group's capabilities. In Lebanon, the Air Force from Israel struck twice in different areas, targeting those identified as Hezbollah, with one target reportedly killed from the strikes. Lebanese army also arrested cells suspected of firing rocks into Israel. According to the report, the detainees were both Lebanese and Palestinian. The Hind Rajab group requested a warrant in the UK to arrest against the Israeli foreign minister for Gaza war crimes. It submitted this request for an arrest warrant against Sa'ar, this is the foreign minister, Gidon Sa'ar, for his role in war crimes committed in Israel and Gaza. The foreign ministry said Sa'ar has not intended to change his plans. The International Criminal Court in The Hague has requested that Hungary clarify why it didn't arrest Netanyahu and comply with its Rome Statute duty and uphold the arrest warrant. Netanyahu visited Budapest for 3 days in April, and the day of his landing, the ICC asked Hungary to arrest him. In the U.S., Mike Huckabee actually arrived in Israel today. He's been confirmed as the U.S. ambassador to Israel, evangelical Christian and former talk show host. The former Arkansas government has been a fervent supporter of Israel and strongly backs Jewish settlements in Palestinian territories, which are considered illegal under international law. President Trump this week held a meeting on the U.S. position in the ongoing nuclear deal with Iran in the White House Situation Room after the U.S. had negotiations with Iran over the weekend. I must have been so tired when I read that a couple of days ago. I thought that they were saying the conversation with Iran was in the White House, but the conversation was just about Iran. So there's been a lot going on here. Apologies for that mistake a few days ago. Preliminary diplomatic talks between the U.S. and Iran officials over Tehran's nuclear program on Saturday were positive and constructive, the White House said. Iran has sought sanction reliefs in exchange for limits to its nuclear program. But then Haaretz reported today that Trump and Witkoff both sent mixed signals on Iran's praise and concerns over the plausibility of the nuclear deal. This is all ahead of the second round of talks that are scheduled. I read that they're supposed to be in Rome. So we'll see what happens in that regard. The Trump administration's Office of Management and Budget proposed eliminating funding for UN peacekeeping missions. And it was announced recently that Jason Greenblatt, the Anti-Defamation League's better known as the ADL, their CEO and national director, was also named Time's annual 100 list of the most influential people in the world. I summarized some of the ADL's work and some criticisms of it by IMEU, saying that they smear defenders of Palestinian rights and student groups, other movements. And I just would encourage you to read about how they self-describe and other groups that criticize them. Since the beginning of the last week, the U.S. has intensified its supply of munitions to Israel via an airlift of transport aircraft departing from American bases in Europe. Dozens of C-17 transport planes arrived at the Nevatim Air Force Base. On Wednesday, 6 planes landed carrying Mk-84-87 heavy bombs, heavy ammunition, and other munitions intended for the continued fighting in Gaza. These were part of preparations for possible U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran should negotiations fail. The aircraft also carried missiles for the U.S. THAAD systems, and other news reported that U.S. military planes flew a Patriot Air Defense Battalion out of the Pacific to the Middle East. It took over 70 flights, according to a commander. Harvard has gone to war, excuse the expression, with President Trump over $2.3 billion. The university resisted his demands, saying they won't accept them. And in response, he threatened their tax-exempt status. And the IRS reported that they are making plans to rescind Harvard's tax-exempt status. The move would be the most significant action undertaken by the Trump administration against a private university, against its crackdown against campus anti-Semitism, not to mention perhaps unprecedented, a move to target a not-for-profit entity's tax-exempt status on political grounds. Trump expanded Adam Boehler's role to special envoy for hostage response. The appointment, which is temporary, does not require Senate approval, comes a little over a month after Boehler pulled his nomination for special envoy for hostage affairs amid Israel and Republican outrage surrounding his direct diplomacy with Hamas and his supposedly flippant dismissal of the resulting concerns. The Middle East Forum came out with a report talking about the funds lost from Israeli and Jewish-owned businesses because of pro-Palestinian protests and their talks and encouragement to use civil RICO laws to seek to recoup those losses. You know, I think it's really important that we still continue to support the right for people to engage economically while also not supporting any violent actions. In other words, if individuals or organizations decide to boycott Israeli businesses, which is a democratic right in the United States of free speech, that they could be vulnerable to these civil RICO laws. This is a reminder for all of us that boycott, divestment, and sanctions, that's actually what brought down the anti-apartheid regime in South Africa. And CMEP's policy position about this says in order to defend free speech and religious liberty, we uphold the right of churches and organizations to find appropriate and various ways to end unjust practices and policies that violate international laws and convention, including exerting economic leverage on commercial and government actors. The federal government appeared to have based its decision to deport Columbia student Mahmoud Halil in a part on unverified tabloid articles or erroneous information, NBC News reported. And House Democrats this week demanded answers on another Columbia student, the U.S. permanent resident Mahsen Madawi, whose detention by ICE agents. Nearly 70 House Democrats urged Trump, demanding answers for the abduction of the Columbia student Madawi, who was apprehended earlier this week by masked, hooded immigration and customs enforcement agents upon arriving for his final citizenship interview at a local U.S. Citizenship and Immigration office. A quick congressional update. The Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions announced that they are postponing the vote on the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act that was scheduled initially for April 9th. And citing the War Powers Resolution of 1973, Jayapal from Washington, Ro Khanna from California, Val Hoyle from Oregon are expressing major concerns over the lack of congressional approval for U.S. military strikes in Yemen. Senators Welch and Van Hollen questioned the Trump administration on U.S. liability for aiding and abetting Netanyahu's potential war crimes. And if you've not read CMEP's statement on the Sunday bombing of the Christian Ali Hospital, I encourage you to do so. We also published an action alert this week that if you've not taken it, please do, condemning all acts of violence and calling for an immediate end to the bloodshed. In the wake of the mass destruction and threats to human life, it is vital for Congress to hear from their constituents who support a swift de-escalation of violence and an end to sending U.S. weapons to Israel. Tell your members of Congress to act now in support of a ceasefire, to end displacement, and to prioritize civilian life. I wanted to just share a little bit of Ben Bigcraft's brief devotional. He is a former intern with us. This was published in the Gaza Ceasefire Pilgrimage devotional for Lent. On February 25th of last year, 24 people or so or more gathered in Scranton, Pennsylvania to walk in solidarity with those suffering in Gaza. The event was a part of a larger Gaza Ceasefire Pilgrimage movement advocating for peace and justice for people in Gaza and the return of hostages. The pilgrimages took place in more than 100 cities around the world. And Abed Rabo, president of the Islamic Association of Scranton, told WNEP News, "We're trying to show people that we're here. We're behind them. They can't talk, but we are their voice." The 25-mile walk was organized for Christians for the Common Good, an affiliate of University of Scranton's Peace and Justice programs, and welcomed people of all backgrounds. University of Scranton professor of theology Will Cohen spoke to the local news saying, "We're not against anybody. We're in solidarity with both people, and we see the particular vulnerability of Gazans right now, who at that point were nearing 30,000 dead because of ongoing devastation. The humanitarian crisis is extremely dire. There's not a military solution to the Holy Land conflict. It has to be done through diplomacy. There needs to be a way for both Jewish Israelis and Palestinians to live together. Julie Shoemaker Cohen of Churches for Middle East Peace said to local news, "I think people are moved. They care. They don't always know what they can do. They sometimes feel helpless. This is a way for people to come together to show that they can try to make a difference in this very difficult situation." So Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage events, they've been continuing worldwide throughout this Lent, advocating for just peace for Palestinians in both Gaza and the West Bank, of course, East Jerusalem as well, as a fragile ceasefire continues between Israel and Hamas. This was written when a ceasefire was in place. John 13:31 says, "When he had gone out, Jesus said, 'Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him.' If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and will glorify him all at once. Little children, I'm with you no longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. But I give you this commandment: love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." O God, whose glory is always to have mercy, be gracious to all who've gone astray from your ways. Bring them in again with penitent hearts and steadfast faith to embrace and hold fast to the unchangeable truth of your word, Jesus Christ, your Son, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever. In the name of Christ. Amen.